What, in the Chindits?
Yeah.
Well, we came from Egypt actually, with the South Staffs, with the 78th Division. Then we became allocated to form a new brigade. The original 77 Brigade, but with new units in, that was to train to go in for the second Chindit do. And before that we went to the Arakan. We were supposed to hold the Japs back. I think it was just to give us a bit of a blooding to while the other blokes retreated. So anyway, we never seen a Jap. We were told to retreat, so we walked 12 mile back. But in the meantime, the CO of our lot said, well, we were mixing with refugees, carry the refugees with you back, what you could. Anyway, I was carrying a dead woman on me back. I didn't know she died on me back, this woman. And once we got settled in, we got moved again. Then we start training for the Chindit do, you see. Jungle training, specialised training, assault courses and all the lot, you know, to see how fit you were. Unfortunately, I went in hospital about a month before we were due to go in the jungle with foot rot. I'd got trapped in mud on this exercise. I got out the next morning, but my feet was in such a state, everybody who looked at them was vomiting. So anyway, I go to an hospital. I said to the doctor, I want to get out because I've got to go in the jungle, you know, on that special operation. He said, oh, I know all about it. He said, it's about another 2 or 3 weeks away. He said, you might make it and you may not. I said, oh, I must make it. I said, I've got to go in. I didn't want to be left behind. So anyway, he got me better with about 2 days to spare, straight to the camp. I go straight to the camp, get allocated on that thingy, and then we're off to this airport called Lalagata Airport, and the blokes were already on the way with gliders, the previous lot before us. They were going to prepare the landing strip for us. So the next night we went, and we landed in this place so miles behind anywhere in the jungle. But we got out the planes, travelled through, I'm giving you this very quick, travelled through the jungle for about 3 or 4 days, hacking our way through mostly. It was virgin jungle. And we get to this place called Morlu, a little village in railway lines. Spreads ourselves on these 7 little hills. And the mules had the larynx cut, you know, so they couldn't make a noise and give us away. And all the harnesses and everything was made quiet. And we had to speak in whispers, see. So we arrived there next morning, we all wake up and beautiful summer's day, honestly, couldn't believe it. Sun beating down. And the officer in charge of this hill, I'd got to know him very well. He was a smashing fella, Lieutenant George Cairns, and he said, I wish you'd have been in my platoon instead of in the gun, because I'd been put with the machine gunners, you see. And anyway, during this thing, I sat by him and we were talking, and all of a sudden there was a commotion. The grass by my head was just going apart like that with bullets. We started to dig in, so anyway I pushed my big pack in front of me, and I said to this officer, get in there quick, like. I said, there's a bit of a hole, only about that deep. Oh, he said, no. I said, well, it'll protect you. I said, I've got my pack. And as I spoke, I could hear the bullets going into the pack. You know, they were spraying the hill with machine guns. It was the Japs. On this only hill we hadn't occupied, had a pagoda on it. I thought, bloody hell, what's going on here? 2 blokes was already hit, 1 bloke in the neck, that was the one I was just talking about, and another lad was killed right away. So this officer said, oh, he said, we can't stop here. I said, what are you going to do? He said, we'll have to fix bayonets. He said, we'll charge up the hill to the buggers and have a go at them. He said, we might as well. So he said, okay. Oh, he said, you can't come. I said, why not? He said, not in my platoon. I said, well, I want to go. He said, oh no. He said, you look after them 2 blokes there. I'll see you when I come back. He said, and he said, keep your eye on the rear in case any Japs come. He said, you can keep them back. I said, okay. So they all shoots off the platoon up the hill. And I thought, bloody hell, that's terrible. I felt it, you know, getting left behind. I wasn't... I wasn't really worried because I was in a hell of a lot after that. But at that particular moment, I never seen that officer again. He goes up the hill, leads a charge on the Japs in this pagoda. Then there was other blokes come, Gurkhas come up the other side, and I don't know whether there was any LFs there. I don't think there was. They were further over. Some more staffs come. Anyway, there's murder on this hill. You could hear the grenades going and rifles clashing and hand-to-hand fighting. And I felt like running up, but then this lad spoke to us about the jab, you see, while this was happening. And he was cursing me for everything. So anyway, this lad come back down the hill and he said, we'll have to get stretcher bearers. He said, the Japs have run away. He said, there's loads of dead Japs, but there's a lot of our blokes killed and there's a lot wounded. I said, well, I don't know where the rest of the regiment is. We didn't, you know. We'd only just got there, like. So anyway, he said to me, the only thing to do, he said, one of us will have to go and look for the stretcher bearers or get somebody. I said, okay. I said, I'm not going, I'm not leaving this bloke here. So he went, and then the next thing, I saw some Gurkhas go up the hill. Then some of them come down again carrying a tin bath. This is only one, well, it wasn't funny, it was awful. In the tin bath, it was swishing with blood and there was a Gurkha in it. He had no legs, one arm, and the other arm was hacked off. I said, oh Christ, he'll not live, that poor bugger. They just carried him away where they thought the battalion was, like, so I don't know what happened. Anyway, another lad come passing down the hill. I said, what's going on? I said, there's all the Japs running away, look, you could see them. In fact, we were taking pot shots at them. He said, Lieutenant Kearns, we've just seen him, he's got his arm hacked off, you know, straight from the shoulder. Anyway, he died, but he didn't die till he went out, like, and he got the Victoria Cross, Lieutenant Kearns. But as I say, I never seen the bloke no more.
Is that the one where they captured the Japanese and then chopped his arm off?
Oh no, we never captured the Japs. The Japs cut his arm off, the Jap officer in the fight. But he killed the officer. And if it hadn't been for him, the other blokes might have packed up, you know, and broke. But he led the thing, so he deserved a VC, but what's he going to get in a VC when he got it posthumously? He got it posthumously anyway. But we didn't know until long after, you know, they put him in for it. Well, anyway, everything quietened down after that. The Gurkhas was bringing the wounded down and on bamboo thingies, like homemade stretchers. Then we start getting everything ready. Now this is a funny bit, this. We start getting, to drop this barbed wire, we put it all around the place and booby traps and things like that. So we thought, well, at night time they might come creeping in, like, because we knew the Japs was going to have a go. So we got these little tins of stuff what we had, the rations, you know, when you open them up, and hung them on the wire. Anyway, that night, there was a hell of a bloody attack. Not that night, sorry. There was the noise of the tins, you see. So this lad said, there's the tins going, and opened up, you see. With him opening up, everybody opened up. And all the battalion was there then. The two columns, all stretched right round. LFs, Gurkhas on the other side. Everybody opened up, and the noise was terrific. And this officer shouted, for Christ's sake, stop firing, will you? There's no answer, nobody's firing back. So they stopped firing. Then the next thing was, next morning, it was quiet all night. Me and this other lad went down and had a look. You know what was there? A dead mule. A mule had strayed and got away, and it got entangled with these little tin cans and made them tingle. But we needn't have ever done that, because after that, when the Japs did attack us, you could hear them coming a mile away. They were shouting and bawling. So we were just waiting for them. We just slaughtered them. They were all over the place. They hadn't a clue. They were easiest lot to fight. Other than that, they were fanatical, like. They kid up to a dead and shoot it in the back. So we never took a prisoner. Every single Jap what we fought, we killed them twice. We shot them and then we bayoneted them, or vice versa, like. You stuck a bayonet in them and then shot them. But, you know, I could go on for hours like this, you know, about what happened.
Don't matter.
It's,
did he frighten you?
oh, you get a course. I mean, you wouldn't be human if you weren't scared. You get a horrible feeling. But when you're in a hand-to-hand fight, it's a funny thing, you know. You've got a feeling of dread, and then once you start lashing out and kicking with your ammo boots and everything, punching and lashing out with your fist and everything. Well, it's forgotten. I think it's the will to survive gets you going, and you're there, you know, and you forget all about what happens. And you're looking at the others as well. And if you see one of your mates getting a bit rough, you splatter the bloke with your rifle, and then you get one bloke down, you go for another one, you see. But lucky enough, like the first time that happened, it was almost 1-to-1, you see. Well, when it's 1-to-1, it was easy for us. We were heavier and bigger than the Japs, you see, and they were light. And they couldn't do none of it. Well, we was taught in jiu-jitsu and all that as well. But I've rolled around the bloody main road with Japanese me, with no rifle and nothing, just me fists. And the bloke fired over my shoulder. That was later on that. But as I say, in the block itself, that went on for 6 solid weeks. Now, the first attack was the next night. That was the first real attack. And we knew it was coming, so we were ready, you see, and you could hear them coming up the hill shouting and talking to each other. I don't know whether that was to make us sort of nervous with the voices and that, but it didn't. I mean, it was ridiculous thinking now if that's what they thought. But anyway, we just blew them all apart with Bren guns, machine guns and mortar bombs and rifles. The rifle was great, you know, killing. Later on they got these automatic rifles, but I kept my old Lee Enfield. But we drove them off that night, and there was bodies all over the place outside. But we buried our blokes, they didn't, they just left them there. And then, after they'd been there a couple of days, well, they were attacking every night actually, for about a week, every night. And there were bodies was piling up, and the stench, the sun was hot, 10 times hotter than this, made the bodies go swell and go black. Like they were like about a couple of 100 Negroes lying about. That's what they looked like. And then these big blowflies was going into the bodies and coming out, and then coming into the block where we were, you know, behind the defences, and settling on us. Oh, it was sickening. And when the evening wind sprung up, the breeze, just like this now, this bloody stench, you used to vomit. And they had nothing to vomit, only K rations. Well, I mean, as it was then, we were all fit as fiddles, no, nothing wrong with us, like so. And with not wearing packs of that, we could leap and we were all like Supermen, you know. We battered the Japs. Anyway, after about a week, they got a bit sick, you see, and they backed off a bit. So we started sending patrols out. And this particular day, sent this patrol out, and he got caught by the Japs, pinned down, you see. So this officer come in and said, we want volunteers to go and get these blokes, try and get them out, you know, rescue them. So we volunteered in the machine gun thing right away, like we took the machine gun, and half a platoon went with us, you see, say about 10 blokes. So we goes on this track with the Brigadier Calvert, the CO, Major Degg, because previous, the original CO had been killed in the very first attack at night. He got killed, he did. I could hear him shouting, come on you Staffords. Next thing it was quiet, like he got knocked off. And then we got this Major Degg, you see. But we go to this track, and he said, now the platoon's right over that way on that wide open paddy field. So I'm looking across, I said, I can't see anybody. So Major Degg said, oh, well, I'm bigger than you, Tom, I can see, like. He said, they're over there, definitely, and they'll not get up. He said, every time they get up, the Japanese are spraying them. He said, I want to volunteer to go. I said, well, I'll go. He said, but you're not scared? I said, well, I said, somebody will have to go. I said, nobody else. I said, I'll go. So he said, okay. He said, I'll tell you what we'll do. He said, we'll get tracer bullets and cover you, and they'll fire over your head. He said, now you'll get a bit worried at first. You won't know whether it's us or the Japs. But you'll see the traces, and you won't know whether they're going backward and forward the way they are. Oh, I said, I'll get over that. So I just took my rifle, added a trail. I said, well, if they're spraying them with bloody bullets, there's not much chance for me, is there? And he started laughing. He said, well, that's up to you if you don't want to go. Oh, I said, go on. He said, well, run as fast as you can and run back like that way, he said, and crouch down. I said, I will, I'll bloody crawl if I have to. So I ran off. He said they're about 500 yards out, like all wide open country, because we were on the edge of the jungle. Well, the next place too, it was this little town, you see, It's where all the Japs were. So I gets to them, and there's a line in a ring with the officer like in the middle, and he was only a young lad like. He said, I think he must have only been about 19. I'd never seen him before like. So he said, get down you fool, you'll get shot. I said, I'm not the fool. I said, I've come to get you blokes, show you the way out. If you follow me at intervals of about 5 yards, you might be lucky. You might get a couple of blokes killed. In that, like, I dropped down in the meantime. He said, keep down. I said, I'm not keeping down. I said, the bloody CO's told me, if you stop here, the Japs will put mortars on you and shell you. I said, you'll get blown to bloody smithereens. I said, you've only got a few minutes to get away, mate. He said, oh, well, if you know where to go, we better. I said, you better. I said, if you want to stop here, you can. Oh, that was the army all over, you see. So I said, right, I'm off. Follow me if you want to save yourself. Well, as I was coming over, I noticed a little bit further over, there was a little ridge, you know, only about that high. But it helped to, you know, they spattered bullets, but didn't miss a single bloke. And we all got back safe. Then the next, there was nothing that night. No action or anything. So everything was nice and quiet. But the next morning, there was a bloody, I don't know where they come from. There must have been about 2,000 of the buggers, all charging up the bloody hills, you know. Lucky enough, we had these blackies, you know, the Nigerians. They were coming in between us. And they'd all got drunk because they'd nicked the rum, you know, the rum ration. They'd nicked all that. And we used to get a rum ration every day. But as I say, the black blokes whipped them, and you could see them. They were getting driven up this hill to fight the Japs, and the eyes was like that. They were terrified. And this sergeant had a big stick.
The Japanese were frightened?
No, the blackies. The blackies were frightened. They didn't know what they were going up to, you see. We said, go on, you're all right. I said, we've just bloody had a go at the buggers, like. So they went up. Anyway, they drove the Japs off. We're on our position, like. And they were supposed to be giving us a break, like, but we was going out for leather ourselves. And I've seen this chap coming up the side of the hill to try and get round with the officer with about 6 blokes. So I aimed my rifle at him. The 2 blokes in the what you call it had been fighting, the 2 gunners. That was Gunner Bradley and Corporal Wood. They were the 2 main gunners, you see, punching the hell out of each other, and bloody Japs coming up the bloody hill. So I said, hey, look out, they were in a dugout what they'd done themselves. I said, look out the bloody thingy. The Japs was only about by that tree. And I just, lucky enough, I had the Bren gun. I just got them on the Bren gun. And then 1 or 2 of them was going to get past, and the machine gun opened up, just mowed them down. So that was another little do. Then the next day, they had to do in the morning, at dawn. And everybody was half asleep because we were beginning to get tired, you know, with no sleep. You tried to get sleep when you could. So this lot was coming up the side of this hill again to get round the back of the platoon on the side. So I took aim, you know, and the officer was coming up towards us, and he had glasses on, and he was looking straight at me. And our officer, his name is Norman Lamont, he said, well, shoot him. So I aimed and fired, like, and as it hit him, he blew up. Big explosion. And he killed these other blokes. Who's this beside him? Oh, it's all right.
What was, you know, you were saying about some of the things you had. One of them was condoms.
Oh, yeah.
What was? So tell me that again. What was it?
Well, we were issued with a packet, and we thought, well, it's funny, there's no women where we're going. Well, there was, but, I mean, what they were originally needed was when the monsoons turned, you know, the cold weather, the rain, and you've seen I think you've seen the video of Burma, haven't you? All the way the rain comes, like sheets. Well, they were used for keeping matches in, keeping them dry, so that you could light a bit of a fire under a cape or something and make a brew. They were used for putting on the top of your rifle when it was raining. You know your rifle, the barrel. Well, if you put the top on, like just like putting it on your thingy, it kept the rain from getting in the barrel and making it rusty, you see, because you have to keep your gear in good condition. And what was the other thing? The other thing was for putting on your willy for the leeches. Because some of the leeches used to go in your behind and in the pipe. And honestly, it was terrible what they did. So We always used to wear them. If we went in deep in swamps, well, it was deep. Because as I say, we weren't always in the block. We came out of the block. We'd been in there 6 solid weeks fighting day and night. We had maybe a couple of days in, a couple of days there, and a bit of a break. But when it was quiet, we used to go out after them on patrols, or some had a bit of a break. But as I say, the water there was full of dead bodies, and we couldn't even drink the water. We used to have to go out in the jungle and hack the bamboo. Well, in the bamboo there was snakes and water. And where there was snakes, there was always this water. I don't know whether it was snake pee or what, but we used to drink the bugger. And at first we didn't eat the snakes or eat, eat mules. But once we got out of the block, on the way up to Mogong, up and down the hills, we used to eat the snakes. And any mules what got shot, we had them, ate them. But the blokes who looked after them wouldn't eat them. They thought too much of them, you see. They said, we're not eating them. They used to cry if they got shot or killed. But I mean, the other blokes say, I'll have a slice of rump steak. As tough as old rope, but we still ate them. We ate all sorts of rubbish, like, but on the way to Mogong, we come to rivers, and we chucked grenades in the river to stun the fish. Then we used to dive in the water, you see, and get the fish. And that was when we were getting good food, you know. Well, to us it was good. The RAF dropped a load of onions one day, so we had mule liver and onions, and you could smell the onions all over the place. But after that, the food got less and less, and in the finish, we were getting none at all. They were just dropping ammunition and medical supplies, but you had to have 1K ration, and originally that was to last you 24 hours. This had to last a week. A little tin of pork, a little tin of cheese, packet of biscuits, a dextrose tablet, and little bits of caramelly things and sugar. And that's what was 24-hour ration. And it used to have to last a week. So what you had to do was, in the finish, you were nearly taking a bite off some bugger's leg. You were that hungry, and you were getting skinnier and thinner till we ended up at Mogong. Like, well, we had to fight our way from the block. Not exactly from the block. After about 4 days up in the hills, we had about 2 or 3 days rest. And then we got the order. Oh, Wingate got killed in between that while we was at the block. And that put the blocks on everything. It changed the atmosphere altogether, because the blokes revered him, you know, they thought he was fantastic, and he was. But the brass hats didn't like him. And we said, when he got killed, he'd just been to visit us, and he flew off back to India, and that's where he got killed, in India, an air crash. And every bloke with him in the plane was killed, and they had such a crash that the bodies were mixed together. So they just put them all in one coffin and buried them in America. He wasn't buried in England. Now that's an English general. He was buried in Arlington Cemetery. But we didn't know nothing about this till years after, like. We just thought, we thought the RAF had shot him down to get shut of him, because he was a nuisance to the brass hats. They didn't like his ideas or anything. It's a well-known fact. If you ask any of the officers at the Chindits old comrade, they mightn't admit it, but if they tell them the truth, they would. And it's a well-known fact amongst all the ordinary soldiers, you know.
What was your rank?
I was just a private.
You was a private?
No, when I joined, I was single. Well, I was single when I finished, but I swore I would never take any stripes, or I was offered a commission anyway, before the Chindit do. They said you can go on a course and be an officer. I said no. They said, well, why don't you want promotion? Have you got no ambition? I said no, I haven't. I said I just want to stay with me mates. I said I'm quite happy. I don't want responsibility of anybody's lives. I said only my own. I said I'm quite happy, and I was. I said I joined the army as a private, and I'll leave as a private if I leave. If I get killed, I hope I do. Because we all swore like that we would never, we'd sooner get killed than get wounded. Because, you know, when you've got no leg and you're hopping about, flogging matches outside of a station or something, and that's what happened to lots of blokes. Couldn't get work because you lost a leg. I met scouts. Oh, I've not come up to that yet. Up to You haven't had your sandwiches there.
Oh, shall I
You
shall I
wanna
take one? I'll
Try and
stop
take
for a
one,
sec,
eat,
shall I?
eat it.
So whereabouts was you fighting in? What part of Burma?
Round the main railway line what goes from Mandalay to India. It was not northern Burma. The places were, well, the main place we started off at White City, that was just a little village, but it was hills, and it was the Chindits called it White City because of the parachutes. There was white parachutes all over the place, so the Japs knew where we were all the time, and they called it White City. Now every place where there was a Chindit stronghold, they had an English name. Some was called Piccadilly, some was called Chowringhee, Blackpool. The blokes got slaughtered at Blackpool though, got overrun. Because they were supposed to come and help us at Mogong and they couldn't. But Mogong was the main place. That's where we had our most casualties. But what they expected us to do was like land on Normandy and tackle some of the pillboxes there with a rifle and bayonet and a couple of grenades. And that's what we had to do at Mogong. There was concrete pillboxes right round the town, hundreds of yards of slimy mud before you got there, great big railway embankment to go over, and then you come to the pillboxes, barbed wire. And that was about, we started off at Mogong with about 2,000 blokes altogether. That was the whole brigade. The LFs, stragglers out the King's Regiment, the Gurkhas and us. And at the very finish I think there would be no more than 300 as a whole lot put together. And originally a brigade should be nearly 4,000 blokes. That's how many Japanese there was in Mogong, 4,000. Well, I was telling you this little story about, there's a funny story if you want to hear it, before this other one. We get to this ridge just before Mogong, after seeing them lads charging over the bridge, the LFs, and we captured this ridge, and the Japanese had left foxholes, which we all got in, you see, to use, we might as well. And I saw this house, just after the lads had tried to get over the bridge, I looked along, and I could see this big house further along the river. So I said to this officer, Norman, we called him Norman, like he's Norman, what was it, Durand. I said, do you think me and a couple of blokes can go along and have a look at that house? He said, no. He said, bugger off. He said, go yourself if you want to go. So I just said, okay. I took the challenge up and I went. Got a rifle and bayonet and empty pack. I said, there must be something there. And I got a load of grenades. So I went along very quiet. I was careful, like I wasn't stupid. It was a daft thing to do when I look back on it. And when I get to it, it was on like stilts, but it was a lovely big house and little steps up to the door. So I'm round the back way, you see. So I opens this door. I listened. I never heard a sound. And when I looked in, there was Japanese officers' suits hanging on the wall, and bunks, 4 bunks. So anyway, I got the cookery and I slashed all the Jap officers' uniforms. And then I looked in the drawers, and in the drawers there was tins of Nestle's milk, bottles of camp coffee. I don't know whether you've heard of them or not. Bottles of camp coffee, jars of Marmite. I can remember all the products. Chesterfield cigarettes, Yankee cigarettes they were, and the matches was English. Well, I got the matches first because they were important. So I filled my pack up with everything I could, and there was this bottle of Wallop, and I didn't know what it was. It was sake, Japanese drink, but I didn't know what it was because I'd never heard of sake then. So I stuck that in my pack and made my way back like, and I thought, well, what I should have done was chucked a couple of grenades in. And then I thought, no, it doesn't matter, not bother. So I went back, you see, goes up the ridge. Oh, there was loads of these fags. So I didn't smoke, I'd never smoked. I give all the lads fags. So these 2 lads got dead interested. He said, where'd you get them? I said, that house along there. I said, there's nobody there. I said, mind you, it's a billet for Japanese officers. Oh, if there's nobody there, we'll have a go. So the 2 of them went along, like. And about 10 minutes after, they quiet like. We could hear shots and grenades going off and voices shouting and all sorts. So it went quiet again then. So I said, hey, do you think we better go along and see where they are? Just then they come round the corner of the track. One was limping. He'd been shot in the leg. And the other one was holding him up. And they were shouting to me, you bloody bastard, you said there's nobody there. And we were laughing. I said, well, there wasn't when I went. I said, I know whether they come back or not. They must have come back after I'd gone and caught them. But anyway, the one with the leg, he got took out to India, like he was no good anymore, like. And after that, like, what we did, we aimed what you call it onto the house, mortar thing, and sent some bombs over and destroyed it. Then our lads just occupied it later on, like. But that was a funny thing, that. But these poor bugs were still trying to get across the bridge, like. They had another go. And I thought, they're just throwing their lives away. So we get across the place, the river we went over, not thingy. We took our gear off and swam across, you see. Got our gear in, we used to wrap it up in a cape and have it on your back. Because most of us was good swimmers, like, and those who couldn't swim, well, you had to help them across. We get across the other side, and then we settled down for the night, you see. And we're on this main road. Machine gun was rigged up, and we could see we weren't far off Mogong, actually. And there was loads of Japanese all over the place, actually. And I'm sitting on the side of the road watching the rear of the gun, because there was no front and no back, you were just there. The Japs were anywhere. So I was guarding the back of the gun, and this lad was on the gun himself. Anyway, I looked up in the light, it had gone dry that day, the moon was shining, and I seen this Jap, walking just slowly past us, so I made a grab at him. And as I did, my rifle fell down the bank. And he pulled his rifle round, he let us scream, he was terrified. He must have thought it was a wild animal. I grabbed him, you know, like that, and fell. And I tried to drag him down, but I couldn't get him down off he was skinny and very agile. And what happened then, he fired at me and missed us and ran away. He got away, you see. So this officer come along, I think it was Lieutenant Wavell. He said, what's going on along here? Oh, I said, I don't know where he's come from. I said, but it was a bloody Jap. Walked up this way, past all you lot. I said, not seen him going now. I said, I tried to grab him, he's away. He said, well, he said he'd be back in about an hour with a big patrol. I said, fair enough, that's what we want, we'll catch them. So I told Brad, like, he was the #1 gunner. So he said, oh, I better keep alert. I said, you better do. He said, well, go back and, you go back where you are, Tom. He said, and keep. I said, okay. But they didn't come back the way the Jap ran, they came the other way, right into the machine gun. And he just opened it up, Brad, you know. It only lasted about 50 seconds, less than a minute. And I run towards him to see what was happening. And the nearest Jap was just about, he was nearer than you, he was just about lying here from the gun, the barrel of the gun. And his head was all blew off the top. And his head must have rolled off, the scalp. And all the brains had run out on the road. And you could see the steam coming off his brains. Oh, it was horrible. And there was 8 blokes on each side of the road, 8 Japanese dead. It's blown to bloody bits. So I said, bloody great, Brad. He said, it's not great, I'm doing my job. Oh, I said, well, you want to do that all the time? I said, we'll have left to fight when we get to Mogong. But as it happened, I worked out better than Brad. And I never dreamt it would happen. Because I hadn't been much on the gun. Because when I first come in, I knew nothing about the machine gun. It was in spare time they were showing me what to do, you see. So I was on the gun and just outside Mogong, and we'd gone on this plantation, and this same road, it ran right into Mogong. Well, the Yanks was dive bombing them this particular night, so we rigged the machine gun up and dug a great deep pit, you know, so the rain wouldn't get at us. It was raining like hell again. So anyway, I was on the gun, it was early in the morning, it must have been about 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. It had been misty that night, and the mist lifted, and as I looked I could see a great big pile of blokes walking across the front, like as if they were going to church, with all the rifles over the thing, is like. I looked, I thought, that's not our blokes. It's not Chinese. We'd never seen any chinks at all. And I thought, this is too good to miss, so I just pressed the button and got every single one of them by one blow. And he kept popping up, and everybody kept sniping at him. And Norman Durant come along, the officer, and he said to me, "You've bloody done it again, haven't you?" I said, "What do you mean?" He should get a court-martial for that. I said, "I won't." He said, "You've killed a load of Chinese there." I said, "I haven't." I said, "I know what I'm doing." I said, "You're supposed to use initiative." I said, "That's 50 or 60 bloody blokes there, all killed with one belt." I said, "Now, that's 60 blokes less for us to fight tomorrow morning," because that was the last attack the next morning. Anyway, later on I was proved right, they were Japanese. But they just must have been idiots. Just walked into a slaughter, and they never caught our blokes like that, because we were too crafty. See, these Japs, when they were coming along the roads, they'd shout and bawl, but this lot weren't, the 50. So I thought, well, that's good. I went, Brad said, "What's going on?" I said, "Here, have a look over there. Bodies all over the place." I said, "Brad," I said, "that was easier than what you done." I said, "And I've got more blokes with less effort," because they were going away from me, not coming like they were to Brad. They must have been trying to charge Brad, see. Well, anyway, between us, we must have got nearly 80 odd Japanese just attacking Mogong itself. That was before the proper attack. And then the next thing, the brigadier comes along and he said, "Boy, we're doing well with these buggers." He said, "Now, tomorrow morning," he said, "I've got to order off this Yankee bloke." We were put under the Yanks, you know. This Yankee Stillwell. It was General Slim put us under them. He had no time for us, like. He said, "We've got to capture Mogong at all costs." I said, "What do you mean, all costs?" I said, "That means we've got to be sacrificed." He said, "Yes." He said, "You've got to have a go anyway." So the brigadier come and he said, "I think I'll bugger off up the hills and take it with us." He said, "I'm not going to attack this place." He said, "You're not fit to attack it." He said, "There's bloody pillboxes and all sorts there." And he was bloody crying, honestly. Brigadier Carl, with the bloody tears was coming down his cheeks. "Oh," I said, "you want to forget it?" I said, "We're here now. We might as well do what we can." I said, "We've already seen loads of them off on the approaches." I said, "There mustn't be all that many left in the town." He said, "Well, when I think of it," he said, "you're probably bloody right." He said, "Well, we'll have a go in the morning." So we all got put in platoons. The machine gun was left, like. I got put in this bloke platoon I was in before, you see, Sergeant Asher. Now, I think he come from somewhere around where you live. Do you know anybody called Asher? It's a Midland name. Tall, dark bloke. Oh, he's a great fellow. He was a sergeant. So he said, "Well, what we'll do," he said, "I'm not going to, in the morning, sludge through that stuff and then try and fight." He said, "We'll go over tonight when it's dark and we'll lie on this side of the railway embankment and not speak all night." So we just had little packs. We left the big packs, little packs, loads of grenades, some few K rations, what we had, few packets of sweets, that's all. And we just all lay there, you see. And the next morning, before we even had a chance to go over the railway, the Japs opened up because the Gurkhas had started firing on them. So as we was going over the railway bank to get down to these, what you call it, they bloody mowed down loads of our blokes, and I was dead lucky again. No, they missed me and they hit Sergeant Ashley and killed him. Killed the blokes on both sides of me, and I was okay. So I made my way to this pillbox. But before I got there, this lad had got there with we had 2 flamethrowers given us on the last minute. And this lad got the flamethrower into they had things over them, you know, grills, so you couldn't throw grenades into the pillbox. But he got the flamethrower through. They couldn't get away, you see. And they were just literally getting roasted. You could smell it was like roast beef on Sunday morning. Terrible. I'm laughing now, like, but you couldn't at the time. The Japs were screaming, you know, and it was horrifying, actually. I think myself it's a very inhuman weapon now. I wouldn't like it to have been used on us. Terrible. Anyway, they couldn't get out, because if they'd have come out, they'd have got more flame on them, you see. But as I say, that was near the end of the road as regards Mogong. We got through. That's how I got my flag, the flag I was talking about. As I jumped over, I jumped on top of this bloke. He was lying there, a Jap, and his eyes were staring, but he wasn't dead or anything, you know. He tried to get up, but it was too late. I just got the thingy in him, you know. He was gone. And I seen it. He had this flag, but he didn't have a pole on it. So I just took the flag off and stuck it in my pack. And that was the flag what I lent that bloke at Ross on Wye. I never got it back, but I got that flag. Anyway, I goes further on, and this officer shouted across, "Don't chase any of them." He said, "Because there's not enough of us left." He said, "If you chased them and they counter-attack, we've had it." He said, "Just fire at them as they got running away," because they were running away like. He said, "Just fire at them." Well, anyway, there was another line of pillboxes to go, yeah. So, Christ, I said, "They're going to the pillboxes." He said, "No," he said, "the other lad's been up there with the flamethrower." But they got this one flamethrower. The Japs hit him with a bullet and all the stuff. The liquid run all over his body and went on fire. And he was just running around, blazing, screaming, you know, he couldn't do nothing. He chucked himself on the floor, but you couldn't save him, so one of our lads just shot him. They had to do to, you know, save him having agony. So anyway, I finished up with a load of Gurkhas on this bridge. There was a great big bridge over the river, and it had been bombed. It was iron girders, and I'm with these Gurkhas, and the Gurkha said to me, "Our officer's been killed." I said, "What's his name?" Because he could hardly speak English, a lot of them. They said, what's his name again? I've got it wrote down in the thing, but anyway, he'd been killed and he was a smashing bloke. And I said, "There's no officer with you?" "No, just us." And they had the other end of the bridge was a few more Gurkhas. Say, "Well, who's that they've got down there?" They said, "It's a Japanese officer." "Oh," I said, "Good, bring him up here." So they start dragging him along the bridge to me, you see. And he looked at me, this chap, and his eyes was hatred, blazing hatred. And he tried to get at us, you see. So the Gurkhas, I said, "Let him go." They wouldn't. They chucked him on the floor. And 4 Gurkhas, one got each arm and each leg. They gave him a leg and a wing like that. Right over this big iron bridge into the river. And as he was falling, his back cracked on one of the broken girders. And, you know, it was terrible, you could hear it. And then he got washed away. Well, the next thing I knew, well, the Gurkhas was giving us a mess tin with tea in. And he said, "Oh, the fighting's finished. The town's empty. There's only South Staffordshire left and the Gurkhas here. What's left of them, like?" I said, "Well, it's a bloody good job they don't attack any Japs come back as we've had it." So we all had to report back to the HQ, like, in this, like, plantation place, like, the other side of the mud. And the next thing they said to us was, "There's about 40 of you, you'll have to march back to India. There's no room on the planes for you, there's too many wounded." I said, "Well, Christ, we're bloody wounded, and we all had something wrong with us, we could hardly walk." I said, "Well," and they said, "You'll have to carry the machine guns as well, there's no mules." So Brad got the barrel and I got the thingy. They weighed £56 each, them things, you know, the barrel and the tripod. Well, I had the tripod, and we trudged off, pouring rain. He said, "Just keep going past where all the Chinese are, and you'll go up to where the Yanks are. When you get to the Yankee airport, they'll give you some grub and things like that." Like I said, "Oh, fair enough." So anyway, we goes up mile after mile, and swamps up to there. And I looked at Brad, and he didn't have the gun. I said, "What have you done with the machine gun, Brad?" He said, "Oh, I've threw it away, it's no bloody good now." I said, "You've let me walk miles carrying this bloody thing." So I just dropped it in the mud and it sank. So we had no machine gun. And I said, "If the bloody Japs attack us now, we've had it." So this lad said, "Oh," I said, "you'll get bloody life from somewhere." We still had our rifles, like, and bayonets and the cookeries. And anyway, we trudged on, but the blokes was that weak. We couldn't sleep. The rain was coming down in torrents, like, it was horrible. So we got on the highest ground we could find for the night and just sat there, like, huddled under the cakes. Well, they didn't keep us dry at all, like. And we had to keep stopping for bleach stops. The sucking your blood is making you weak as well. So we just sat there, and then next morning, like, when we was ready to go, there was 2 of the blokes dead. They just died in the night. They were that bloody weak. The least thing could kill you. We goes another few miles on, like, and another bloke dropped. He went. There was 4 blokes died out to 40. And I think a couple of them just bloody disappeared somewhere. Because when we got to, as we was going along, we'd been walking miles and miles in the rain and that, you know, a couple of days actually, and we were only going slow. And lucky enough, we never met any Japs. But we seen these Americans like coming down. And they were running down, waving to us, you see, shouting, "Hey, you guys, are you Australians?" I said, "Australians?" I said, "Ah, we're Australians from bloody Brum and Liverpool." Aye, they thought we were Aussies. But mind they were bloody good to us. They took us in this, they had a great big encampment built. They had a cinema in it, bloody big dining room. We couldn't believe it, honestly, in the middle of the bloody jungle, what they'd done. And they took us in the dining room and said, "Right, we'll get you some grub. Just look as if you need it." I said, "We haven't got the bloody strength to eat." I said, "I'll have a bowl of soup." This officer come in and said, "Don't give them blokes anything to eat." He said, "You'll kill them." You know, we'd been that many days without food, like, only a little, what we could scrape, the snakes and things like that. But anyway, what they did, they give us a sloppy food, and every one of us went to toilet straight through. And this bloke said, "Oh, well, I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll go to pictures after." I thought he was taking the bloody mickey, you see. I said, "Pictures in the bloody jungle?" I said, "You kidding?" He said, "No." They had a big open air cinema. And I can remember the bloody woman that was in it. What was her bloody name? She was singing a song called Buttons and Bows. She was, Dinah Shaw. It was Dinah Shaw. And I could hardly see it, as I said about the eyes, like, all as I could see was a blur. I could hear the music. So this bloke said to me, he said, "Your eyes is in a terrible state." I said, "No." I kept scraping them off and there was more coming all the time. So they give us a bit of a wash and then we started to walk towards, it was an airport. And this medical bloke come out and he said, "You bloke could never walk to India." He said, "Who told you to do that?" "Oh," I said, "A bloody idiot of an officer said we'd have to walk back to India." He said, "You realise how far it is and how many mountains you've got to go over?" He said, "You can't even walk over the bloody road." To God's honest truth. He said, "Get to the airport and report into the military there." He said, "And they'll have you back in India on a plane." He said, "Mind you, it's a rickety plane, it's got no doors on." And this plane come, he said, "and you'll find all kinds of natives on it, doby wallers and cleaners and things like that." So I said, "It doesn't matter as long as you get a lift." So we get on this plane. And it flew low, you see, because if it had flew high, we'd have all got blew out. But it was only the jets weren't out then, it was a double motor Dakota. And you could see down, like, I could see just blurs of green. I couldn't see hardly anything till we got back to Derridun. And we all had to report to the medical room right away. Deloused, fumigated, cut, shaved. Mind you, our teeth were good because we were using what the Gurkhas were using in the jungle. They told us about this, like, they had these little sticks, what they ripped off the certain trees. I think it was what called neem sticks. And they used to rub the teeth with them, you see. And that's how we kept our teeth clean, with these neem sticks. But anyway, what happened to me with getting rushed to Ceylon, what few blokes come out that I knew, they'd all got sent to different camps to convalescent. I missed them all, because as soon as I come back from Ceylon, I got whipped straight to Bombay, a place called Reilly, big camp, and there was nobody there that I knew. And then I got whipped onto Bombay on a boat back to England. And within 6-7 weeks, I was in Northwest Europe. There you are. Of course, I got better as I was coming home on a boat. And you're getting good grub, like, and you're putting your weight back on. But I ended up at Lübeck in Germany. So you can see I had a rough time. And before that, I was in the bloody desert. That was our second time in India. We'd been previously with a couple of thousand ITI prisoners we captured.
Did you lost many friends, did you?
Oh yeah, hell of a lot. But mind you, we lost friends, like, got wounded and went out. I lost track of them. I've got that lad in Addiston now. I'll be going to see him next week, because he's not been up here, but he come up to see us when I worked in the Lake District. And then the lad who was best man at his wedding, he was in the other machine gun section, he was in the same battalion, but there was 2 machine gun sections, you see. He was in that one, Jock Strachan. And he stayed on in the army, become an RSM. So I don't know whether he's dead or alive. He's tried to get in touch with us, with me, but I've lost track of him altogether. I've been up to Dundee, no good. And in fact, I thought the other lad was dead Sid, but he's not. He's alive and kicking. He's in good health like me, like able to get about. I don't know about George Harrison. He was another one. He went to Germany with us. He was from Walsall. They were all from the Midlands. Brad was from Dudley. The two Sergeant Wood and Corporal Wood, they were from not Belper, Burton-on-Trent. All that I knew loads of the blokes. The lad that got shot through the head, he's sitting beside us and he splashed all over us like. Oh, I think I've missed that. I've missed loads out, you know. You couldn't tell you everything, it would take too long. No, it's amazing. And
Well, it was a long time, it was a long...
Oh, it was, yeah. Well, it was nearly from March the 5th till August the 1st. That was just about 6 months, wasn't it?
That's how long you was in.
We were only supposed to be in 6 weeks, and we were in 6 months. They are. That's why we were in such a state. In fact, we were worse off than prisoners of war, because prisoners of war didn't have to fight, and I weighed 6 stone and I had to fight. That's all most of them weighed. I have a photo somewhere. I think one of the kids took it. One of the daughters has got it somewhere. I have a photo, and I just like one of them blokes in Belsen, you know, thin face and your bloody shoulders, just like a skeleton. Queer. And yet you get better of it all. But the funny thing about it, you know, you hear them say now about the stress and everything. I mean, I never suffered from stress. Man, I had no, at the time, I had no responsibility. I had no wife. I wasn't married. I was single. And I think once you get married, your attitudes change, though. I would have been very careful if I'd have been married. Because what I was sorry for was the blokes what had been out there for years, and the wives had run off with Yanks and Canadians and things like that. And it did happen. And them blokes just lost interest and got killed easy. They weren't worrying about living. As good as committed suicide. You know, there's loads of things like that happened. But you couldn't do nothing about it. I mean, the single blokes didn't care, like, they were nothing to worry about.
Is this your door?
Hmm?
I think your door just kind of...
But the blokes did lose the nerve. And it comes to me and say, I don't want to die. Well, what it was when the war started, I'm not going through it all, like, when we was on the top of this hill, it was like Northern Ireland, Palestine, Jews and Arabs fighting and us in the middle. But we used to have to be in little sections in certain areas, like to look over the town and keep it. And we all sat out this night, and we told that the war had broke out. It was already in the army. The South Staff was in Palestine then. And honestly, it's a fantastic regiment. It was good, plenty of sport, boxing, swimming, football, everything. The food was good, and there's discipline. There's got to be discipline, like. Even in the jungle, there's discipline. But as I say, they were talking about the war. They were saying to each other, well, what do you think? Think we'll last through the war? I said, well, it depends how long it's going to last. I said, well, personally speaking, if it lasts over 2 years, I said, none of us will be here. It's fairly obvious. I said, we're in at the start. I said, have you ever heard of anybody in the front line living for over 2 years? I said, we didn't know it was going to last 5 years. You know, 39 till 45. 6 years, wasn't it? Aye. And even the first time we went in action in the desert, thought we've had it. We were charging up the sand dunes to the high ties, but lucky enough they just packed in, and the Libyans. We never fired a blinking shot at. Oh, I got a bayonet wound in the neck off them. But that wasn't done. They didn't try and bayonet us. I jumped diving into this dugout. The bloke just stuck his bayonet up and run on us. There's a little arch gone now, the mark, a very little mark there. The collarbone saved us. Otherwise it would have gone right through us, yeah.
Did you respect the Japanese or no?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Well, as fighters, but as a race of people, I didn't. No. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And yet, a funny thing, you know, when I went to Korea, I was married then, and I thought, well, I'm not going to go through the same carry-on fighting the Chinese. I knew the Chinese and I knew they were useless. You know, they were the type of person what wouldn't fight. They were like the Italians. They'd fight if they knew there was thousands of them and a couple of you. But if they knew they had to fight man to man, they wouldn't fight. They didn't fight in Mogong. Yet the Yanks said that they captured Mogong. We didn't see any Chinese till after Mogong was captured by the Chindits. And I can stake my life on that because I was bloody there. So can all the other blokes was there. And what was I saying about?
Japanese.
Oh, the Japanese as a people. Yeah. Well, they bow and scrape. They're very polite. And the funny thing, I've got photos of some Japanese what I met when I went to Tokyo, and they worked with me, and I got to know them because I went to Japan from Korea because I'd taken up to be a chef then, you see, after the war, because previous to that I was an apprentice chef. So I went back on my own job, and they advertised for a chef for Japan, for a big camp. The Australians this was, not the British. But they said they'd take a British bloke, so I went. And I took 2 lads with us. So that's how we got to know the Japs. And there was a hell of a fight one. It was the 17th of March, I think it was. There was 2 British regiments in the camp. The Ulster Rifles and the Jocks, Argyll and Sutherland Islanders. And they were fighting. Well, I was standing watching, you see, and I just saw this Irishman break a glass and he was just going to jab it in the Scotsman's face. So I got a glass myself full of beer and I threw it and hit this Irishman on the head. It saved the Jock's face, you know, getting splattered. It was horrible. So I just turned around and walked back in the kitchen. Next thing I seen this Irishman leaping over the counter after me like. Well, I didn't bother. I was fitter, even fitter then than I was in the bleating jungle. So he come running at me and I just stuck one on him. He went on the floor. And while he was on the floor, I was battering him like that. And all these Japanese were standing watching us, you see. I said, you bastards needn't watch me like that. So the one bloke come across, a young one, he said, oh, I wish I could fight like that. Oh, I said, that's all right, you've got to do sometimes. I said, yeah, he attacked me. So he said, why don't you come to the judo school? I said, I don't need to. His name, I've got his photo there. I said, I don't need to, Naga. He became a good friend of mine, like. I said, I was taught all the unarmed combat in the army. He said, oh, it's better off us. He said, we were the originators of it. He said, well, we weren't, the Chinese were, but we improved on it. So I used to go down and wrestle about with the Japs, like, and there was a lot of blokes frightened to have a go. I wasn't, I used to get stuck into them. One of the blokes, he was a champion of the bloody world, he paralysed me, put me out. You know, you got to hold on. He said, well, before you can learn judo, you've got to be put out. So I said, fair enough, like. But I used to chuck loads of them all over the place. I was good. I'll show you what they give us, look, as a present.
Chindits in 3 ranks, get on, fight!
After the retreat in February 1943, a British brigadier, Ord Charles Wingate, went into Burma with an experimental force called the Chindits. They fought a number of actions against the Japanese, and although they had killed some of the enemy, the operation was not that successful. They had learnt a lot about bushcraft and had blown up the main railway line in a number of places. Brigadier Wingate had taken in a 2-brigade strong force of 2,800 men and 700 mules divided into 7 columns. They had been in Burma for 4 months. Nearly 1,000 men did not survive, either by being taken prisoner, killed in action, or succumbing to the sheer hardship of the terrain. Wingate and his men came out of Burma ill and weak, but that battalion became the nucleus of a new Chindit force called Special Force.
It came back with only a limited number out of his total force from this 1943 campaign. He did prove that you could operate behind enemy lines, doing almost at will what you wanted to do, with supplies being brought in by air, and of course with the added benefit in the second campaign of not only being flown in but flown out if it was necessary.
When we came out, the publicity people wanted to make a lot of this, because this wasn't exactly a victory, but it showed that the British could take the offensive and beat the Japanese at their own game. So Wingate was ordered back to England, and Churchill immediately got him, and Churchill was going to Quebec. People don't know this very much. Going to the Quebec conference with America, Russia, China and Britain, and he took Wingate and his wife along in, I think it was the Queen Mary, and he made Wingate lecture all these top British generals and Air Force people, and he described his idea of doing long-range penetration, going behind the Japs and attacking their communications and destroying their communications and supplies. So Churchill, who knew something about this type of warfare, he'd been in the First World War and at Cuba and other times like that, he seized on Wingate and made him talk to all the heads of states of all these different nationalities.
The big operation came in 1944, and it was called Operation Thursday, and it was a division plus of troops totaling 25,000. I remember the effect in India of hearing about the first experimental operation by Wingate, and morale suddenly soared, because instead of doing nothing but fight for a European type of terrain, we suddenly realised the Jap wasn't a Superman, and that here was a man, Wingate, who knew how to tackle him in the jungle. And we had a man called Ferguson with a monocle come out to us, and he stood on a soapbox and said, "You are extremely lucky. I want you to hear this good news. We're going to take all your armour away from you, and we're going to give you mules and give you an enormous pack to put on your back, and you're going to walk hundreds of miles behind the enemy lines and get into his guts." We didn't mind losing our precious armour. We were excited, and I certainly was. And after very tough training, and it was tough training, we moved to the very northern tip of Burma.
So that was the beginning of our march into the jungle. Eventually we were, I believe, about 480 miles behind the Jap lines, where our job was to create airfields for the rest of the division to fly in.
There was a hiccup right at the last minute when an American pilot arrived about a half an hour before takeoff, showing a photograph of one of the landing areas covered with teak logs. Half the force were to go into a place called that was codenamed Broadway, and the other half to an area that was codenamed Piccadilly. We of course weren't in on this last minute hold up, but there was quite a lot of discussions with, of course, all the generals, Wingate, our own battalion commander, General Slim, and so on. And I think it all hinged in the finish on whether Wingate was willing, and Calvert for that matter, because he was the commanding officer of the flying, as to whether they would fly into Broadway only. And they eventually came to the decision that they would. So about half an hour after the time that we were scheduled to fly, we at last took off. What wasn't realised was that this area of Broadway was covered, much of it was covered with elephant grass, and it didn't show up in the aerial photographs that had been taken some weeks previously. The deep ruts in the ground where the Burmese had dragged teak logs down to the chungs during the wet weather, and the dragging of the logs had made quite deep ruts in parts of the landing ground. Well, now the theory was that when a glider touched down, everybody got out, and half the men took up defensive positions, and the other half was to drag the glider out of the way so that the field was clear for other gliders coming in. But because of these ruts, plus a couple of trees right in the middle of the clearing, we couldn't move the gliders at all. And before we knew it, a glider was crashing on glider. I mean, once a glider has been released by the Dakota, there was no way that you could stop it. They just had to land somewhere. So it was pandemonium to begin with. In addition to that, there were instances where the tow rope, there were two gliders on tow by a Dakota, one on a short tow and one on a long tow. And there were a few instances where the tow ropes broke. So those gliders, some came down into the jungle, and there were crashes, of course, and other instances where they did land safely on a sandbank of the Chinwin or Irrawaddy.
And say there was some gliders that were lost and don't know what happened to them. The one that took off in front was two of my mates were in, and we said, "See you down there." Never saw them again.
However, there were enough gliders landed during the night of the 5th of March for us to do something. Calvert had a code word to send back to base in Assam. Sawyer Link, if the fly-in was unsuccessful. There was a reason for that, because a Sawyer sausage was or a sausage made from Sawyer flour was was the last thing that any British Tommy would eat. They were terrible things. as against pork sausage, which would be relayed back to base if it was successful. Well, things did look pretty black. I mean, I can't remember just how many gliders landed reasonably safely now, but we lost quite a few, and there were 30 odd wounded and quite a number killed. But fortunately the landing was not met with by Japanese. It was clear. But with all the wounded and so on, and the crash gliders, everything did look black, and sometime in the middle of the night or early hours of the morning, Brigadier Calvert had to send back this code word of Sawyer sausage, as it all being unsuccessful. But by dawn, everybody had come to grips with the situation, plus the fact that by a stroke of good fortune, one of the crash gliders was carrying a bulldozer of sorts, or an earth remover, and it had been forced out of the glider on impact, and the Americans with it were able to salvage it from the wreck and get it going. And the Kingsmen who had flown in, both of 81 column and 82 column, got down to clearing the strip, levelling the areas that the area that was required to receive Dakotas, because the plan was that once the strip had got to be made ready to receive Dakotas by the following evening. So we toiled all day. Some of the men went out on patrol to make sure that we hadn't got any opposition, while the remainder of the men and these Yankee engineers used their bulldozer to make a strip something like 1,000 yards long to receive Dakotas, and it was achieved. And that night, and it was one of my most memorable moments, the Dakotas started coming in, and Heathrow wasn't in it, because the runway was lined by flares, so that the Dakota pilots knew where to land. And I should think all night long those planes were coming in about every 3 minutes and just disgorging all the troops and the animals and 25-pounders, artillery pieces, Bofors guns. And it went on like that for about 3 nights and days.
Our first job after landing was to block the railway, and I'd studied all this and reconnoitred it, and we had all these stores ready before we came in. And so the first thing that happened, we dropped all this barbed wire, sandbags and picks and shovels and so on like that, and we dug in as hard as we could. We'd practiced fortnights digging before they went in, so people knew what to do. And we had some very good Royal Engineers with us. And then we had Vickers machine guns, 3-inch mortars and so on. And the Japanese attacked, and we had this tremendous amount of firepower, which they destroyed themselves on the wire. The wire was really 1914-18 type. It was about 30 yards in width, and the Japanese would throw themselves on the wire trying to cross it, blowing themselves up. But even during the fighting, the RAF, so I'm really going to say, the RAF would be dropping to us at night. We'd put out our flares, and whilst this battle was going on, only a few hundred yards away, the Dakotas were dropping by parachute our ammunition and supplies and everything else for the next day. It was most dramatic.
The Chindit Special Force was well behind Japanese lines in North Burma, and the main stronghold and airport was called Broadway. The Special Force was being divided into separate columns to set up strongholds in the surrounding area: Aberdeen, White City, Chowingi, Piccadilly and Blackball, but the Blackball block had to be abandoned.
Well, they were at us right from the start, and they were, well, in the end they just broke through, and we had to make a way out the best we could. Because I mean, they were, right from the time we got there, they were shelling and attacking day in, day out.
I think the Japs threw in everything that they got. 3-inch mortars, 6-inch mortars, 105s, and they pasted us every day. They attacked almost every day. There was hand-to-hand fighting nearly every day. And it was all in the middle of the monsoon.
But when we heard that Wingate had been killed, we were absolutely devastated, because the whole thing revolved round him, and we felt we've lost the master. And it was then Brigadier Ferguson's job to try and pick up our morale again and ensure us that he and Brigadier Calvert had learnt all the tricks of jungle warfare from Wingate, and we had no need to worry. We were still in good hands under their leadership. And within a few days we'd more or less got over the loss of Wingate, but at the time it really was devastating, because Wingate was the Chindits, really.
It changed the atmosphere altogether, because the blokes revered him, you know, they thought he was fantastic, and he was.
And Lentane, who was Brigadier of 111 Brigade, was chosen to take his place. Now that was a shock to everybody, because we thought it was automatic choice on Wingate's death would be to replace him by Brigadier Calvert. Stood out a mile. He was the one to command the outfit, but it wasn't to be, and Lentane took over.
Well, I didn't hear about that at all. I didn't agree much with with Lentane, who did take over, but it never entered my head that I'd be chosen. I can tell you that, and I don't think I would have been much good. I think they did consider me, and they considered I was far more worthwhile in the battlefield than I would be back in India with all this political stuff going on, tug of war and this and so on like that. I might have lost my temper and done badly and so on like that. Because it wasn't a position where I would have had to have my own light aircraft and pop in and visit the various brigades and so on. But whether I could have done that for any length of time before being bumped off, by a Japanese or the aircraft crash, I don't think I could have achieved much that I could have done on the ground, because I did have up to 7 different battalions under command, so which was a very big lot of the Chindits, you see.
Yes, one couldn't help but respect the Japanese soldier in one sense and be puzzled in another, because the psyche of people who could be quite so fanatical was difficult perhaps to the Western mind to take in.
Well, that's the way the Japs work, you see. They were inhuman. As far as we were concerned, they were supernatural. They were unnatural people. It was their religion. They believed that if they died for the Emperor, it was the greatest thing ever to die for the Emperor. And it was nothing. Every Jap we caught had a grenade round his waist, so all he had to do was pull the pin and blow his guts out. Commit harikari. They believed that there was nothing, nobody could beat their Emperor. He was the bee's knees, you see. I mean, in this country, our King and Queen go visiting the people and go around the streets and talk to them. Now, the Japanese Emperor pre-war was not even allowed to be looked upon. He was always in cover when he went out anywhere. So that at the end of the war, when the Japanese prisoners all over the Far East had to be returned to Japan, they'd all been posted as dead. It was a great dishonour to be taken a prisoner. That's one of the reasons why they treated the British prisoners so badly.
We respected them as a very good fighting soldier who would go on fighting till the end. We had one Japanese prisoner with us. A great embarrassment to have a prisoner with you when you're on the march through the jungle like this. But one night he saved our embarrassment by, although he was wounded, somehow he'd managed to get the bully beef tin, we'd had a supply drop, and with a supply drop sometimes there was a bit of bread and extra bully beef, and he cut his throat with the jagged edge of a bully beef tin during the night. That was the shame of being taken prisoner in their national outlook.
We never went past a Jap lying on the ground without sticking our bayonet in him, because so many times the fellas had walked past him and been shot in the back. The Japs used to dig a hole on the side of a track or a road, and they would let the whole column back go past. They'd shoot the last man in the back. Well, it's a terrible thing when you get attacked from behind and you don't know where the shot's coming from.
The difference between the two enemies, when we were fighting in the desert, we had 6 men badly wounded and had to leave them behind when we retreated in a cave. We counter-attacked the Germans and recaptured this cave. The 6 men had been in there for, say, 2 days. When we found them, they'd bandaged their wounds, given them washes as best they could, and left them as comfortable as possible. When we were in the jungle, we had 4 men taken prisoner. When we advanced on the Japanese, found the men, they'd all had their arms cut off and were lying on the side of the path in the jungle without their arms. Dead, of course. That was the difference in the two types of people.
I couldn't hate them to a terrible extent because the prisoners of war tell me they were just as cruel to their own people when they fell sick as to them, the prisoners of war.
The only wounded we got were people who were badly wounded. They were very valuable because some of them would just try and die. They'd say, we got hold of an adjutant of a good battalion, and he said, shoot me, and so on. But we tied him up and bandaged him and sent him out by light plane in Dakota back to India, where he refused to talk to anybody and just willed, in spite of being forcibly fed, willed himself to die. He hadn't got very serious wounds, but he just died. Another one, he committed suicide by eating his blanket, and these were people. Got a number of them back, and when they would speak, they reckoned they'd ceased to be Japanese. You see, when they left Japan, they'd been sort of almost a funeral service with their parents and everything else before they left, because they decided they'd die for their country.
But they were very brave and they had some very, very good ideas. That's my opinion. And their jungle craft was marvellous. They used to build fire lanes, and they used to put sort of what they used to call a punji pit, and it was a trench, and they used to stick bamboos in this trench, sharpened and then burnt at the end, green bamboo sticks, and then it becomes very needle sharp and very hard, and it go through the boot or somebody like that if you fall. And they used to put it on the sides of tracks. They used to dig these trenches all the way down and then cover the earth up. So if I'd have somebody fire or something like that, you jump off the track to get onto the road, and you jump in the punji pit. And this was the sort of things which they would do. And then of course these things would go straight through you.
It's strange that they were. We didn't see an awful lot of their cruelties or atrocities. On the first Wingate operation, after crossing the Irrawaddy, we had a small number of Gurkha wounded, badly wounded, whom we couldn't take on. And I think this was what Wingate had taught us. We took them to a village, Burmese village, called the village headman, and I wrote a note, and one of my people could put it in Japanese, saying that these men have fought for their king and country, fought bravely for their king and country, just like you are doing. I would be glad if you would look after them and treat them as honourable soldiers with your customary bushido. You know, bushido is the sort of honour of a Japanese soldier. And we only found out later on that they were well looked after.
We saw their booby traps as they used to make. Now they weren't very clever with those, but they used to use a lot of captured stuff. And they used to get British grenades, and then they used to pull the pins out and have the pins still in. And they thought, you know, as soon as the grenade thing and the lever was still in position and stuff like that. And they were quite daft in that sense when they used other people's equipment.
But I think, like in all cases, the cruelties are very often done by the people behind the lines. The Koreans, who guarded a lot of the troops in prisoner of war camps and on the railway and things like that. They were Koreans, and they were more brutal than any Japanese was. And on the whole, the fighting troops of the Japanese army didn't practice cruelty. They might shoot people, but they didn't. They did sometimes on the retreat from Burma. Some of my men were stood up and bayoneted, but this was not usual. It's difficult to tell. Strange enough, in the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, we had observers on both sides, and it was then that the Japanese were exemplary in their treatment of Russian prisoners and behaved very, very well. But what I think was, I saw the Japanese in 1937 fighting in Shanghai. I think that Chinese, who are a cruel race, they treated the Japanese cruelly, and the Japanese learnt their cruelty, you might say, from the Chinese.
I remember that morning vividly, because by the side of me was one of my officers, Lieutenant Tony Musselwhite, who turned to me and said, "They've shot my finger off." 2 minutes later he was dead. That is delayed shock. And we moved off, and one man called Lieutenant Wilkins had about 12 machine gun bullets raked up and down his left arm. And we had to get away from this area to get to a light airstrip to get some of our wounded away. And I remember this man saying, "Stick it, stick it, I've got to get back to my wife, stick it." And he did, and he's still alive today. What a mess he was that day, what courage and strength he drew from the memory of his wife.
Now every scratch you got on your body, on the trees or wherever, once the blood came, there was little flies used to eat the way in. And if you didn't cover that up, those flies would eat through to the bone and make your leg or limb useless. So those jungle sores were terrible things. I mean, I got them on the neck of my backside, right up my spine, on my elbows, my knees, my ankles, all places where you rub, where you can get a rub, you know. Any man who had a lot of fat on his rear, for instance, on his cheeks, with them rubbing together, he got sores right down round there.
The main problem were the mosquitoes, from which of course you could get malaria. The ticks, from which you got typhus. And leeches. Leeches could produce terrible sores, because once they fasten themselves to your skin, they just draw on your blood and they bloat it up. But I found them most revolting.
Leeches, for instance, when we got leeches on, if a guy didn't smoke before he went there, he smoked before when he came out, because we used to light a cigarette or our pipe and stick it on the backside of the leech, and it would drop off then. But if you try to pull a leech off, it would leave its head and sucker sticking into your leg, and you would have a sore there for months after to get rid of that. So you had to burn the leeches off.
Well, they were used for keeping matches in, keeping them dry, so that you could light a bit of a fire under a cape or something and make a brew. They were used for putting on the top of your rifle when it was raining. You know your rifle, the barrel? Well, if you put the top on, just like putting it on your thingy, it kept the rain from getting in the barrel and making it rusty, you see, because you have to keep your gear in good condition. And what was the other thing? The other thing was for putting on your willy for the leeches, because some of the leeches used to go in your behind and in the pipe, and honestly, it was terrible what they did. So we always used to wear them if we went in deep in swamps, what was deep.
you went through a lot of chongs, and most of these chongs had sandy bottoms. Well, the sand penetrated your boots, your socks, and got between your toes and acted like sandpaper. And that crucified, you got jungle sores on your feet. Yeah, that crucified a lot of people as well. You couldn't stop and take your shoes off to go across these chunks, that just plugged through them, you see.
On the other hand, the death, which was always increasingly with us, and particularly with my own platoon in the latter stages, was far more due to illness, malnutrition, various diseases known and unknown, malaria perhaps to some extent, and what we afterwards realized was scrub typhus. Many of my men died of that, far more than died from actual combat. I suppose in actual combat I lost possibly about 4 or 5 out of my original 30 or 32. But I lost about 12 to 15 who were just either died or died in the night or had to be left because we had no means of continuing with them. Under those conditions, we know, and the casualty knows, the sick man knows, that there was no choice in many cases, when we were on detachment anyway, and to prop them against a tree by the side of the path and give them some rations and water and cigarettes if they smoked, and wish them well, and carry on. And that's what we did and what we expected to have to happen to us if we were ill.
It really was the next thing to torture, because there were old-fashioned packs, not like the very sophisticated packs they have now where the weight is on the bottom back. All the weight was on the 2 straps on the shoulders. They were never designed to be used the way we used them, and we were carrying 2 packs, you see, not 1. And this is what made it. When we marched for an hour and then we had 10 minutes break, you were so tired and so sore that you couldn't take the pack off. You just fell down, and some of the chaps fell asleep there and then. And when it came to get up, we had to take the pack off lying down, and then your mate, you'd stand up and your mate would lift the pack onto your back. But it really was, it was the physical, it really was the next thing to torture. It was so heavy on your back. And the surprising thing was, the bigger men were less able to take the weight than the smaller ones. I'm not a big man, but there was quite a lot of chaps much smaller than me, and when they had the pack on their back, you couldn't see them hardly. And yet, if you passed a man on the wayside, it was usually a 6-footer. And I can't account for that, but we had one little chap called Tiny Aitken, and he must have been, I should think, about 5 feet tall, and I should imagine about 7 stone in weight, and he was carrying nearly as much as his own weight, and he never fell out.
Well, one good tip which we did find out was that nearly everybody will drink poisoned water. Everybody will. Animals drink it, birds drink it, all sorts of animals drink it, and human beings will drink it. But a mule won't. A mule's a funny animal, so if the mule drinks the water, you can drink it.
And the mules suffered most, really, because they had all this tremendous weight on the back. They had the mortars, the mortar bombs and the ammunition, and the mules did a wonderful job. Very often the ponies were left by the wayside, but the old mules never gave in.
That was our lifebelt. Needed blowing up higher than that. It's still blowing up after all these years, after 50 years. You hung it round your neck and strapped it around your back. And you got in the water, you had your hat on, your weapon on top of your pack. rifle, Sten gun or whatever you had, and you swam across the river, pushing your pack in front of you. You pushed the pack with all your gear inside. And the mules, of course, you had to keep the mules' heads above the water, because if the water got in the mules' ears, it's similar to getting in your mouth. It would have drowned them. So that's what they had to do with the mules. They had to, with them having the vocal cords cut, I think it's like somebody have a tracheotomy, cutting the throat. You know, you breathe through your throat and not through your mouth or your nose. And that's the mules' ears weren't. You mustn't submerge them in water.
This is a funny bit. This we start getting to drop this barbed wire. We put it all around the place and booby traps and things like that. So we thought, well, at night time they might come creeping in, like, because we knew the Japs was going to have a go. So we got these little tins of stuff what we had, the rations, you know, when you open them up, and hung them on the wire. Anyway, that night, the noise of the tins, you see. So this lad said, there's the tins going, and opened up, you see. With him opening up, everybody opened up. And all the battalion was there then. The two columns, all stretched right round. LFs, Gurkhas on the other side. Everybody opened up, and the noise was terrific. And this officer shouted, for Christ's sake, stop firing, will you? There's no answer, nobody's firing back. So they stopped firing. Then the next thing was, next morning, it was quiet all night. Me and this other lad went down and had a look. You know what was there? A dead mule. The mule had strayed and got away, and it got entangled with these little tin cans and made them tingle.
I can't honestly remember any mules dying, no. And the sad thing was, when we came out, we had to leave them behind.
The American care rations was a godsend, but you were only supposed to, officially, live on American care rations for a few weeks. You see, in American care rations you got 3 meals approximately a day. That's if you got a full drop. And you got a drop, supposed to have a drop every 5 days, and you got a 5 days ration. Well, 3 meals, you got a breakfast, dinner and tea. Well, your breakfast would have, you'd have 2 packets of biscuits. One would be sweet biscuits and one would be unsweetened. The unsweetened one you probably ate with your tin of meat. And you had a small tin of meat for one person. And then you had a drink, which was, you could have a satchel of coffee for your breakfast. For your dinner, you'd have a satchel like a bottle. And for your tea, you had a lemon or orange satchel, which you mixed with water, of course. Also, in each packet, each meal, you had 4 American cigarettes, you had American chewing gum, and you also had Dextro tablets. Now these Dextro tablets, you could chew or suck them, and they were supposed to give you energy. And also, you see, the only trouble is, we didn't get tea in care rations. Well, most British troops drink tea. So they dropped us tea bags, powdered milk and sugar in bags.
The air supply was first class. Well, that was from the RAF. We got everything we wanted. Ammunition. One time somebody sent me a signal saying, it looks as if you are out of food, so we're cancelling your request for ammunition and going to drop you some food. I sent a signal back saying we can live without food, but we can't live without ammunition, which is true, you see.
On the way to Mogong, we come to rivers where we chuck grenades in the river to stun the fish. Then we used to dive in the water, you see, and get the fish. And that was when we were getting good food, you know. Well, to us it was good. The RAF dropped a load of onions one day, so we had mule's liver and onions, and you could smell the onions all over the place. But after that, the food got less and less, and in the finish, we were getting none at all. They were just dropping ammunition and medical supplies, but you had to have 1 K ration, And originally that was to last you 24 hours. This had to last a week. A little tin of pork, a little tin of cheese, packet of biscuits, a dextrose tablet and little bits of caramelly things and sugar. And that's what was 24-hour ration. And it used to have to last a week, so what you had to do was, in the finish, you were nearly taking a bite off some bugger's leg, you were that hungry.
They said it was a little bit of luxury we were going to get. We did. We got a bag of flour and a big block of fat, you know, cooking fat. What bloody hell are we going to do with that? No good to us. I know we've got a cook with baker with us, haven't we? Little Stan out there. He was Master Baker. So what he did, we got an old big tin, put all the fat in, and he mixed donuts up. We had 2 donuts each for all of us. I think by the end, it was hunger more than anything. It's all my life, from school days to now, I've been at about 10 stone. Vary 2 or 3 pounds either way. And I found in Burma, from 10 stone, I went down to about 7 stone. You can see every rib and everything like that. Because although we got these air supply drops every 5 days, you couldn't be in the right spot every 5 days to take one. You might be surrounded by Japs. So it was starvation at times.
We had excellent air support, that is, by fighter bombers. Those were mainly American, which meant we didn't have to carry artillery all over the place. There was very close bombing by the American Mustangs. And then the other thing, which did a tremendous lot for morale, we had these light planes, and therefore we had air evacuation. So as a man could be wounded in the morning, he could be evacuated to our main airfield at Broadway in the afternoon and flown back to India, Assam, in the evening. Resulted that he was in a major hospital within 12 hours of being wounded, which of course did a tremendous amount of chances of surviving and so on, and much better than any other theatre of war, really.
But the Yanks did a good job, same as that. I was flown out by a light plane, and they were just using the main road as the for landing and taking off. But they did a good job getting blokes out.
We then come across Stilwell's, General Stilwell, the American, sort of a Chinese army. He had a Chinese army then, and he thought the world of these Chinese army things, and we didn't. They robbed all our food, all our ammunition dumps and everything like that, and they were quite willing to fight our troops or anything like that to get these things.
Vinegar Joe, the American General Joe Stilwell, he had been in China before. He'd been on the retreat from Burma, and he'd marched all the way back himself. He was age 65 at the time, which was very old, and he was a type of Japanese a type of American who had been brought up to hate the British, and we were the imperialists and so on like that. But he was a good soldier, and he got the Chinese to fight.
Stilwell, I don't know, for some reason had a hatred of what he called the Limeys. He didn't think we could fight, he didn't think we wanted to fight, he thought we were cowards, and it was through him Mountbatten had to go up to make the peace at times.
So saying these bloody British, they're all cowards and this, that and the other. He was saying that about everybody, and he was a very bitter language he used, which of course didn't help very much. But he did get the Chinese to fight, and with our help, he took the two towns in the north, Mogang and Michinaw. We captured Mogang.
The Chinese were supposed to take that, and we were supposed to support them. But it finished the other way around, that they couldn't get across the Chong to support us, so we had to go in on the attack on our own, and they supported us. But the American reporters with the Chinese sent word back that the Chinese had taken Mogang. And the Chinese colonel came up to our troops and said, "You took Mogang, you're very brave soldiers." But that didn't alter the fact that the public had been told that the Chinese took it.
Well, his army didn't actually take Mogang. Mike Calvert's took it. Because when Stilwell sent a message saying that his Chinese forces had captured Mogang, Calvert sent a message saying, "I am extremely scornful of this message because instead," he said, "they may have taken Mogang, but in actual fact my 77 Brigade took it, and I've also taken Umbridge."
The American marauders, Merrill's marauders, they were white troops on a similar style to us. They took Michinaw. They'd been helping Vinegar Joe Stilwell's Chinese, coming from the north, and they took Michinaw, which is another big city. Those two cities had to be taken, you see, because they had rail links and air. You could land planes there, you see.
If you've got to capture Mogang at all costs. I said, "What do you mean, all costs?" I said, "That means we've got to be sacrificed." He said, "Yes." He said, "You've got to have a go anyway." So the brigadier come and he said, "I think I'll bugger off up the hills and take it with us." He said, "I'm not going to attack this place." He said, "You're not fit to attack it." He said, "There's bloody pillboxes and all sorts there."
We were asked to do that, and we were told to take it at all costs, at all costs, at all costs. There my brigade had been fighting for nearly 5 months. Our numbers had decreased from about 4,500 to 2,000. Then at Mogang we lost another 1,000 men. Terrific, and all young subalterns, young people who came in. They were rather like the Western Front in the First World War. They were gone within a fortnight and so on. And we didn't have artillery. The air support wasn't as good as it used to be, because by this time it was the monsoon, clouds everywhere.
Before we even had a chance to go over the railway, the Japs opened up because the Gurkhas had started firing on them. So as we was going over the railway bank to get down to these, what you call it, they bloody mowed down loads of our blokes, and I was dead lucky again. No, they missed me and they hit Sergeant Ashley and killed him. Killed the blokes on both sides of me, and I was okay. So I made my way to this pillbox. But before I got there, this lad had got there we had 2 flamethrowers given us on the last minute. And this lad got the flamethrower into they had things over them, you know, grills, so you couldn't throw grenades into the pillbox. But he got the flamethrower through. He couldn't get away, you see. And they were just literally getting roasted. You could smell it was like roast beef on Sunday morning. Terrible. I'm laughing now, like, but you couldn't at the time. The Japs were screaming, you know, and it was horrifying actually. I think myself it's a very inhuman weapon now. I wouldn't like it to have been used on us. Terrible.
And that was a terrible time, really.
There's about 40 of you, you'll have to march back to India. There's no room on the planes because there's too many wounded. I said, well, Christ, we're bloody wounded, and we all had something wrong with us, we could hardly walk. I said, well, and he said, you'll have to carry the machine guns as well, there's no mules. So Brad got the barrel and I got the thing in. They weighed £56 each, them things, you know, the barrel and the tripod. Well, I had the tripod and we trudged off, pouring rain. He said, just keep going past where all the Chinese are, and you'll go to where the Yanks are. When you get to the Yankee airport, they'll give you some grub and things like that. Like I said, oh, fair enough. So anyway, we goes up mile after mile and swamps up to there, and I looked at Brad and he didn't have the gun. I said, what have you done with the machine gun, Brad? He said, oh, I've threw it away, it's no bloody good now. I said, you've let me walk miles carrying this bloody thing, so I just dropped it in the mud and it sank. So we had no machine gun, and I said, if the bloody Japs attack us now, we've had it. So this lad said, oh, I said, you'll get bloody life from somewhere. We still had our rifles, like, and bayonets and the kukris. And anyway, we trudged on, but the blokes was that weak. We couldn't sleep. The rain was coming down in torrents, like, it was horrible. So we got on the highest ground we could find for the night and just sat there, like, huddled under the cakes, but they didn't keep us dry at all, like. And we had to keep stopping for bleach stops. The sucking your blood was making you weak as well. So we just sat there, and then next morning, like, when we was ready to go, there was 2 of the blokes dead. They just died in the night. They were that bloody weak, the least thing could kill you. We goes another few miles on, like, and another bloke dropped, he went. There was 4 blokes died out to 40, and I think a couple of them just bloody disappeared somewhere, because when we got to, as we was going along, we'd been walking miles and miles in the rain and that, you know, a couple of days actually, and we were only going slow, and lucky enough we never met any Japs, but we seen these Americans, like, coming down, and they were running down, waving to us, you see, shouting, hey, you guys, are you Australians? I said, Australians? I said, we're Australians from bloody Brum and Liverpool. Aye, they thought we were Aussies, but mind, they were bloody good to us. They took us in this, they had a great big encampment built. They had a cinema in it, bloody big dining room. We couldn't believe it, honestly, in the middle of the bloody jungle, what they'd done. And they took us in the dining room and said, right, we'll get you some grub. Just look as if you need it. I said, we haven't got the bloody strength to eat. I said, I'll have a bowl of soup. This officer come in and said, don't give them blokes anything to eat. He said, you'll kill them. You know, we'd been that many days without food, like, only a little what we could scrape, the snakes and things like that. But anyway, what they did, they give us a sloppy food, and every one of us went to the toilet straight through. And this bloke said, oh, well, I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll go to pictures after. I thought you was taking the bloody mickey, you see. I said, pictures in the bloody jungle? I said, you kidding? He said, no. They had a big open-air cinema.
But it was all rather sad, as it turns out, because it was not as Wingate envisaged. I think from memory, I think I came out about the 10th of August, something like that. Whereas we'd all been promised that we'd be out by the end of June.
Then the rest of the platoon found out howls of derision and dismay along the lines of, we've come all this way and got out of this bloody place, only to find this maniac flying us out.
We do owe you. I think that's
so important to ensure that the memory of all of you remains alive. And I can assure you that as long as I remain alive, I shall make sure that what you did is still remembered.